Uh, so just to get us started, everyone with an HF in their name is an honors fellow. Please feel free to reach out to any of us if you've got questions about honors or the fellows. Throughout today's event, we ask that you please hold on to your questions until the end, and then during our Q&A session, you can ask through the chat function. Thank you all for joining us, and let's get started.
All right, so to start off, we're going to introduce you to all of our amazing professors that we have here today. They'll give a brief introduction, about 1 minute, and kind of about their background and how they got to their current path at UCLA. So starting out, Dr. Renzel.
Hi, everyone. Oh, I'm getting some bad reverb there, sorry. My name is Dr. Michelle Renzel. Thank you so much for having me, to the honors fellows who put this together. Yes, I see some names I recognize. So I'm in the Institute for Society and Genetics, where I'm an adjunct professor. And I have a research background in physiology of stress and organismal biology. So as you can see, I've studied birds for a long time, asking questions about how animals cope with unpredictable environments and conditions as part of their life histories. And how I became a professor at UCLA was somewhat unconventional. I came to UCLA as a postdoctoral researcher after I completed my PhD. So I came here to do more research on avian physiology, and then actually linked up with the freshman cluster program, which I might talk about a little bit later, and started teaching here and transitioned into a teaching position. So happy to be here. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome, Professor Knowlton.
My name is Barbara Knowlton, and I'm a faculty member in the psychology department. My research interests are the neurobiology of learning and memory. So studying brain mechanisms of how we acquire information. And I use techniques like functional neuroimaging and testing different groups of patients, looking at memory in older adults and things like that. My pathway to UCLA, I've been here actually almost 25 years. So I've been at UCLA a long time. I started out as an undergraduate, I was interested in medicine. So I was a pre-med, but I became interested in research and actually was a lab studying learning and memory. And that kind of made me think I'd much rather be a researcher than a clinician. And I applied to a PhD. I did my college work at Johns Hopkins. I grew up in California, but I felt like I needed to experience the East Coast. But after that, I've been in California since then for my PhD and my postdoctoral work. And I've been at UCLA since 1995. And I love it here. It's a wonderful department.
Professor Scheib.
Excuse me. Hi, Rebecca Scheib. I'm at the Institute of the Environment and Sustainability. I guess my pathway is I did grow up on the East Coast, grew up in Pennsylvania, and I went to Penn State, great big, kind of similar to UCLA, research university. And I was fortunate enough to actually be in a similar program, a scholars program. And I worked all 4 years in a research lab doing deep sea biology. So that was super exciting. Got to go down in submarines, like miles down the bottom of the ocean, and travel around the world to go to ocean field sites. So that was super fun. I got my PhD at UC Santa Barbara. So I've actually been in California longer than I've been in Pennsylvania now. Seems a little crazy. I did a postdoc at USC. Don't hate me for that, they're okay. But I do like it better at UCLA. I've been here since 2002, and I am an adjunct professor. In my case, that means I work about half-time teaching and doing research, harmful algae and chemical biological oceanography at UCLA. And about half-time I do art and acrobatics. So a little bit of a mixture.
All right, Professor S.
Hello, everyone. I'm Professor S. It's nice to see all of you guys. So I teach in writing programs and in honors. I probably split my time pretty evenly. And my research interests, I'm a film historian, but I also study digital media, and I teach digital media writing, as some of you in my class right now. And my path was also a little non-traditional. I think I went to USC, I know, as an undergrad, which I know, boo, but you know, I split my time. UCLA, I've been here longer, and I got my master's and PhD here at UCLA. And I was very lucky enough to work while I was in grad school in writing programs while I was getting my PhD in cinema media studies. And one of my mentors, who is coming up next, is Lori Mattinson, who I've worked with for a very long time. I've been teaching and writing programs since 2007. And then when I finished my PhD, I ended up staying and got involved in a lot of different areas, including honors, which I have found very, very rewarding. And I think the only break that I took in between my time between undergrad and grad school, I worked in the industry for a little bit, and I still do a lot of freelance. Just to keep relevant and understand how, you know, the digital is working right now. So I'm really excited to be here. I hope to see a lot of you guys in my class coming up in the next two quarters.
All right, next up, Professor Mattinson.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lori, and you can call me Lori. I've actually been at UCLA since 1987 because I started as an undergrad here. Then I was a grad student at UCLA, although I took breaks in between to live in San Francisco, and then another year and a half to live in Jerusalem. And then I've been teaching with writing programs along with Professor S. I didn't know they call you that, Mary. I love that. Maybe I'll be Professor M. Anyway, I've been teaching it with writing programs since, well, for about 25 years or so. So like Barbara Knowlton, it's been about 25 years. Amazing. Where does the time go? I teach all different kinds of writing classes, a lot of your freshman writing requirements like English 3D. The D is for diversity sections. I get to create all kinds of new classes every year, which is exciting for me. Currently, I'm teaching a class for freshmen on the social, political, and educational value of stand-up comedy, which I love, which is just an interesting way into looking at social and political issues. The honors class I teach is called Body-Mind Literacy, and basically looks at, you know, why do we think of the life of the mind only as a source of freedom? I'm concerned that we ignore and dismiss the body as an important site of knowledge. And so we're looking at how can we create a fully embodied education, and what does it mean to integrate body and mind in the classroom and in how we learn. So very excited to be here, and I don't know if I'll see any of my own students here because they tend to be seniors in my classes, so they're probably already working or at home on Zoom like us. Okay, thank you, great to be here.
Hi, everyone. Professor Von Blum has taught at UCLA in the departments of Communication and African American Studies since 1980, after spending 11 years on the UC Berkeley faculty. He has been teaching his honors course titled The Critical Vision, A History of Art as a Social and Political Commentary since 1983, and has written extensively on this topic for more than 45 years. His first book, The Art of Social Conscience, was published in 1976, and he has since published 5 books and many articles on these themes. Recently, he focuses on the visual and cultural efforts of the African American community. He is a trained lawyer and a longtime civil rights and political activist, and will be joining us at 6 p.m. Professor Abramson has been a professor of psychology at UCLA since 1976. He has taught in the Honors Collegium for 3 years and currently co-teaches with his wife, Tanya L. Abramson, Master of Fine Arts, who is a lecturer in the Honors Collegium. They teach Art and Trauma 149 and Feminism, Art, and the Metaphors of Trauma 159. Additionally, he is the author of 11 books and 130 scientific scholarly articles and has done work in psychology, public health, constitutional law, and art. He is also the lead singer and lyricist of the band Crying for Kafka, and has a daughter who graduated from UCLA and is a lawyer who got her degree from UC Berkeley. The photo below is him and his band. He's the one who's raising his hand. And his wife, Tanya, is the backup singer. And he will be joining us at 6:30 p.m.
All right, hi everyone. Dr. Maisie may be joining us later. He's currently run into some technical difficulties, but he is the teacher of the Psychology of Fear, which is an awesome honors collegium class. I highly recommend it. It's been one of my favorite experiences, which teaches the intersection of your psychology and anxiety, fear, and all of those issues and how you can best overcome them. So it's a really enriching course. I highly recommend looking into it if you're looking for an honors collegium course. And he is also the co-founder and director of psychological services in the Dental Fear and Anxiety Center, which specializes in the psychological treatment of patients with dental phobias. So as I mentioned, Dr. Maisie will be joining us a little bit later. And Dr. Vaughn unfortunately can't join us today because she lives in another time zone, but she teaches in the Biotechnology and Society cluster, the same one that Dr. Rensel teaches in. And she's also part of the UCLA Center for the Study of Women. And she has put together an excellent little video that answers some of our questions because she wanted to share her advice with all of you. I will be dropping a link to that in the chat. Feel free to check it out at the end of the panel. She's awesome.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for our lovely professors. I love that burst of energy, especially at the end of week 9. Thank you so much to all the students who are here, especially. We love to see it. I'm pretty sure you all are going to be the reason my Zoom crashes in a bit, but hopefully that won't happen in this section. So the reason we're all here, right? How is all of this linked to honors? And I know it can be a really stressful experience as an honors student trying to approach professors in the first place, not knowing how to go on, choose which honors collegium class you want to do, how to start the process of creating an honors contract, how to get into research, etc., etc. I'm sure you all have a lot of questions, but as honors fellows, we tried our best to categorize the different commonly asked questions that we get. So the first one is the relations to honors. And within that, we have some amazing questions for our professors. And hopefully I won't have to pick on any professors, and they are just dying to give lots of different answers to you all. But the questions are in these different categories. So what is your experience or connections to honors at UCLA? I know a few professors have already touched on this, but if the others wanted to add on to it and talk about what coursework you've had, how you've interacted with honor students, how many different opportunities there are to interact with honor students with professors. So if anyone wants to just jump in. I can jump in really quickly. I can't say that I have a ton of experience with honors courses, but all of the freshman cluster courses, which I know some of our attendees are in, do provide honors credit for all 3 quarters, and also give the honors collegium credit, I think, for our spring seminars, which is super awesome. And I've also personally worked with students doing SRP contracts and honors contracts through research when I was doing kind of more wet lab work as well in the past. So that's amazing. Thank you so much for adding on to that. Like our honor students know, the clusters are a really good way of knocking off a few GEs, getting rid of your writing 2 requirements, especially if you have professors from the writing programs here, if they want to speak to that. And talk more about it. I know Ms. Mattinson and Professor S spoke about it, if you want to add on.
You want to take that, Lori?
Sure. My sound cut out for 1 second, so can you repeat that what you just said?
Yeah, so I know we were speaking about clusters for a bit. So in terms of the writing programs and how it's linked to honors, or how you end up interacting with a lot of honor students specifically, if you have had any experiences that you'd want to share.
Well, I'll jump in. Mary, you can say something about the cluster if you want, but I'll just offer, I don't do research, but I have students read a lot of research. And one thing I do help them with is really learning not to be intimidated by anything that they might read. And we really work through it together to show them, you know, how to read critically and know that there's nothing that's out of your reach, you know, that you can teach yourself, and with a group, also with some help, have access to any kind of research. One thing I would just want to throw in there is to please think of yourself as, especially as an honors student, but as a student at any point in your career, think of yourself as our colleagues, that you're really here to participate in a conversation, not just to listen in on one, right? It's not like we're having the conversation and you're just sitting in the lecture. If you really think of yourself as our colleagues, as a professional, then you can join the conversation on a whole new level. And part of it has to do with just how you see yourself as a student. So we invite you to that level. And Mary, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I definitely concur with Lori. One of the things that I would also recommend, I do, the clusters are very popular, and a lot of our instructors in writing programs do teach a lot in the cluster program. I've done it before on 2 occasions, and it is a really good way to get a lot of writing out of the way, but it's very focused writing. So whether it's you're in the biotechnology cluster, you're in the 60s cluster, as I know those of you guys who have had me before, I really try and do exactly as Lori has said, and that is to really make it so that we do talk like colleagues, and that you come to class as scholars, and the work that you do is very collaborative. I have done some SRP with students. I've also done some directed research. I have been on honors contracts before, and it has been a very rewarding experience for me. I also in our professional minor, so I highly encourage a lot of you guys to sign up for or take some classes, check it out. But I've worked a lot one-on-one with students who are doing some directed writing in terms of their profession and what they hope to be doing in the future. But my biggest piece of advice is don't be scared to ask. I think a lot of your professors, especially those in honors, but I think a lot of your professors here at UCLA is, don't be intimidated. We love it when you come to office hours or when you reach out for an office hour appointment and you want to talk, especially on Zoom. It's really easy to do so. And I think for this last question, I'll just start the response here. I don't know that honors courses are, the course I specifically teach is it's a different kind of writing that we do. So in Honors 50, all the students who go into it, and most of you scholars end up taking it, the end goal is for you guys to start your e-portfolio. And so that work is a very different kind of work, and the work you do in my class for honors is very personal. It's a personal journey, and it's your own journey, and it's really just a pleasure for me to get a chance to work with people from all over campus, which is fabulous. And I would not say it's any more work, at least on my part, than I would normally be teaching in any of my classes for writing programs. It's just it's a different kind of work, because it's work it might be harder for the student, I think, because you have to think about yourself all the time and you're not used to that. But actually really reflective writing is what you're doing in Honors 50. So that's what I would say in terms of this last question here about honors courses.
I'm going to one quick follow-up on that, which is our classes have a W designation for writing. And so, for example, I will help students find relevant places to submit their writings. So, having students publish pieces, op-eds in the Daily Bruin, or publishing pieces online, or submitting to other, other places that are aligned with their own interests. So that's another way we take what we do in class and bring it outside the classroom.
I'm so glad all the professors mentioned that, especially like the fact that students shouldn't feel intimidated to reach out in the first place, and also that huge emphasis on like how much of the work that you're doing and like the honors classes are so interdisciplinary that it actually helps you. Like So actually, Professor S, since you mentioned the SRP and honors contracts, I was just hoping you could expand on that. Like, I'm really glad you plugged 8C50 also, because I've taken that course and I know a few other students have also taken it twice. So like, I'm sure you're doing a great job with that. But I was just hoping you could expand a little bit more on like, how do you start that process of like creating a contract, like, or like the SRP process? Like, is it difficult to reach out to professors for that?
Sure. I guess that's the biggest fear I think that the students have, is how to, reaching out to the professor. So the ones I've worked on, a lot of this, two of the students, one was doing some legal, wants to be a lawyer and wanted her focus to be on legal writing. And so what I normally start out with is I make the student come to me with a mini, so usually I'll agree to hear, and they come to me with a mini presentation of what they're thinking they're looking at. I ask them a lot of directed questions, give them feedback, and then I ask them to come up with an outline. And if they're able to outline their project, they already, from that step on, like, I know that they're ready to start this directed project. And I think a lot of students, they often they will do it. They come prepared. One thing I've noticed about honor students is you guys take an awful lot of units. Like right now, in this, this is not an honors class, but it's one of my professional writing classes I have students who take 25, 28 units, which I didn't even think was okay, but it is apparently. And that's the other thing, is making sure you have time, because research takes a lot of time. And those of us, all of us who have or got our PhDs and published quite a bit, doing research, it takes a long time. And so I think the hardest part for students is really how to carve that out into their schedule, because it's not something they're going to be able to cram. It's got to be something that's very direct and very focused. And so it is a collaborative effort. Instead of working with their students in a group setting, they're of course going to work with a professor. And I have, even if it was research projects that were not in my area necessarily, I've helped students, like, as Lori mentioned, especially with publications, et cetera, getting them to go the right places, but putting them in touch with people that I know around campus. And that's the other thing I really want to reiterate with students, is that some of us have been here a while and a long time and have made connections in other departments. So your professors, if they're not able to directly help you, we might know people who can do it. And so that's why I say, don't hesitate to go to office hours and meet up with your professors. I honestly, I think you'll find it very worthwhile. And I've had so many rewarding relationships with many of my students here at UCLA. And it is, in terms of the contract, a lot of the paperwork, once I've established that it's, a project that I can work on with the students, then it's pretty easy from there on, and a lot of it is them coming up with something on their own, which is of course an important part of becoming a scholar, is you being able to formulate your own questions.
Thank you so much for that. I know I saw a few professors nodding their heads. Just to wrap up, if you had any like other comments that you wanted to add on, or share.
Oh, I could just add, in terms of research, I've worked with a lot of students in research, and I would say that it varies from those students who might just spend a quarter with an SRP just to kind of see what it's about, versus students who maybe join my lab very early in their undergraduate career and stayed with it. And I think that it's not too early to start looking for faculty to work with, because many times a project will take quite a long time to unfold and to get to the point where, say, you could publish a paper or have, at least in the sciences, and you'd have enough data. It might take a while to learn the techniques that the lab uses. So I would say there's no reason to hesitate and wait and try to find a lab or someone to work with early on. And I think it requires some persistence, because I think the ratio of students to faculty at UCLA is such that faculty are getting often lots of requests, and at some point their lab might be full. So I think you have to be persistent, have a few different options in mind, and keep asking and keeping an open mind as to what to do or what lab to join. But yes, definitely don't feel intimidated to talk in office hours, to talk to faculty whose interests you find out on the web or talking to their grad students. So I would say to try to get involved in it early, because that certainly it was the most enriching part of my own undergraduate experience. And I've really enjoyed working with students who've gone on to graduate school because I think of things that they learned at UCLA and being in a lab.
Thank you so much, professors. I feel like already after hearing y'all speak, I think the students are less intimidated to reach out to professors in general. I think with that, unless there's any other comments, we can move on to the next section. Okay, cool.
Hi, everyone. I also want to welcome Professor Von Bloom. Thank you so much for joining us. This is actually the perfect segue into our next topic. Going along with SRPs, we're going to talk more about how students get involved. Next slide, please. Can you tell us a bit about why students should get involved in research and how students can come up with a good research project or topic? Dr. Shipe, could you start us out, please?
Thought I wasn't going to get called out.
Sorry.
That's okay. So I should have mentioned this before. I am also associated with the Sustainable LA Grand Challenges program. And we have a undergraduate research program where I help with 30 to 45 students each year who work on sustainability related research, but it's across campus. So it could be with a professor in any department, any field across campus. So I have been able to, through that program, hook up students to faculty and just across campus. And it's been really wonderful to meet professors across campus as well as students. And so your questions, students should get involved if you have any interest, of course, in research, then certainly test out the waters. As I think Professor Knowlton mentioned, you maybe would just stay a quarter and see how you feel about a project, or maybe get involved for a longer time. And you just have to talk to the faculty about what they're interested in and on what level they would be interested in interacting with you. So it really can vary from professor to professor. And then I'll just maybe start with the next question a little bit and then leave space for someone else. In terms of coming up with a good research topic, I would say that this also can really vary across fields. And sometimes you can just kind of enter the research group of a professor and learn about what's going on there and help out in some basic way at first. For myself, my first experience in research at Penn State was actually mixing up seawater. So we were in the middle of Pennsylvania and we needed to keep organisms, marine organisms, but there's no ocean touching Pennsylvania. So my first job was actually adding salt to water and mixing it. And that's how I got like in these big, big carboys. And that's how I got involved in the research. So it went from there to becoming more and more involved. And that's a completely valid way to just get immersed in the field, see what's happening, talk to grad students, talk to the faculty, and see if it's interesting to you to follow up on.
That's really interesting. Professor Knowlton, do you have anything to add to that? I know you're also sort of a STEM professor here.
Yes, I would say by checking out every faculty member has a website who has a lab. I've had students come to me because they just were checking out the websites of different faculty. Some have come to me through one of my graduate students were their TA, and that's how they joined my lab. And others I had in courses. I've had one student who did quite a lot of work in my lab, actually started in the cluster that I teach in. So I had met her when she was a freshman. So I think just taking advantage of all these different ways, you're just what you kind of see on your own searching in the web, what you discover in classes and talking to faculty in office hours, and also talking to your TAs. You often will spend a lot of time with a graduate student and finding out about their research. they may be able to tell you about a lab that might be of interest to you. So I would kind of explore all of those things. And then I guess I did want to mention one thing on this slide about the remote learning situation. I think that's a really big challenge because it has reduced the amount of research that's going on. And I know as faculty, we have been challenged to try to think of ways to involve undergraduates in research in this environment. And we are trying to do some of that. I know we do a lot of behavioral testing, and we're trying to do some online kinds of testing and do those kinds of, development of stimuli and things for the future. So I think it is a little bit challenging. It may be that it will be difficult in the next quarter or two to find someone. They might tell you, talk to me next year. Or they might at least say, we don't have too much for you to do now, but here's some papers you can read for when we are able to ramp up. So I think being prepared for that in this current environment might be a good idea.
Yeah, kind of going off of that. Do you have any advice for students approaching professors, like sort of in the beginning of their research journey? Especially during this remote learning, how should students sort of contact you guys? Should we set up office hours? If we're not in your courses, like how should we go about that?
Yeah, I think you can. I know most departments will have a list of office hours when, for faculty, even if you're not in the course, you can still come to an office hour. I think most students will email faculty and see. So I would say either of those ways. And then the third way might be if you have a TA and then maybe talking to the grad student who might, that might be a way to meet a professor if you have heard about a graduate student's research and sounds really interesting, then maybe you can meet them sort of through the graduate student. So I think those are three ways you could try.
Yeah, and can I just add something about reaching out as well? I don't do as much kind of research these days because I'm primarily teaching, but I do advise a lot of students who are coming in asking this very question, like, how do we get involved in research? How do you reach out to professors? How do you find someone to work with in this massive place? And I think one of the pieces of advice that I often give to my students is to reach out over email, but to try to cast a wide net as well. So to identify a variety of different labs and faculty members who are doing work that you're interested in, to do a little bit of your own research, check out those web pages, maybe check out their publications, and really, think about why you're interested in that lab, because I think that can come through in your communications with the professors as well. And then my other quick piece of advice is that if you don't hear back from a professor, that may mean that they don't have any openings in their lab, but it may also mean that they just have a million emails and can't handle them. And so, at least in my personal opinion, I think it's totally fine to send a follow-up email, a week later or 2 weeks later, just to kind of put it back on the radar. And I think that for me personally, that helps me stay on top of things and stay accountable. So I think that's, again, I know it can feel a little intimidating to do that, but I think it's a worthwhile endeavor to try to establish contact.
I'm just going to support that really fast. The polite reminders are completely appreciated and go a long way. And I coached 45 students into finding faculty advisors this year. And so that felt like a big accomplishment again, because of the reduction in research. But I do want to encourage you, if you're interested, a polite, organized email, maybe even attach your resume, the more information they have about you, to look at your academic background. And then again, I support what Michelle mentioned about why you're interested in that research, to explain to that professor, oh, I read this paper that you wrote and I got really excited, and just expressing that interest, I feel goes a long way.
Thank you so much for all of your input. Professor S., do you have anything to add to this, maybe on more of an English side, or Professor Battinson?
Sure. Well, of course, as a writing instructor, I want to say take the time to craft a clear and purposeful email. You'd be surprised by how many sort of texting style messages we get, or just hey, can I research with you? This is very casual, and think about not only what can I get out of your research project, but what can I contribute? Who are you as part of a team, or how do you view this work that might be an amazing contribution to the project? And I'll also just throw in there, when you're looking for good research topics, sometimes joining other organizations can help you find something. So just for example, I am part of the UCLA Prison Education Program, and we teach classes inside of juvenile halls and women's prisons right now. We'd like to expand to men's prisons as well. And we finally just got the okay to do some Zoom classes, which is an enormous step forward, because normally we could not have internet inside the prisons. So there have been several undergrads and grad students working with us who found research projects based on their work with us there. So just follow your interests, and you never know what sort of research project that will lead you to.
Yeah, I definitely echo everything that Lori said. One of the things I tell students all the time is, it's been, no matter what your discipline is, remember, especially those of you who are looking to go to grad school, your job when you graduate with a PhD and you're working in a research lab, or you're working with, getting your English PhD, film PhD, whatever it is to contribute. Like your job is to produce an original contribution to your field. And it's really great to start on smaller projects. So testing it out with an SRP to find out if you like that kind of research, and don't be afraid, again, really to start early. And the emails, it is not insult. Professors do not mind if you send the reminder emails. And I do have to echo what Lori says about a nicely worded, crafted email, sometimes with your CV attached, or even as you'll have in my class, if you take it, your e-portfolio, so that whoever's looking at it could take a look at what you've done so far, and have it readily available, because sometimes that is, you never know when they're going to take a look at your email. And also you want to present yourself in the best possible way. So that is, I would really echo that. And that is the great thing about SRPs is that it is short and you get to find out, but again, don't hesitate, and think about yourself as contributing and being a collaborator on a project.
Really quick, just one more question. There's a question in the chat. Does your research project have to be related to your major? Can I get a quick answer maybe?
I guess I could pipe up really fast, just because I place a lot of students with faculty who are not in their majors each year. And it's really just, research is so interdisciplinary these days, and our interests are so diverse that quite often there can be some really nice synergies between students and professors in different departments. So definitely not.
Thank you so much for all of your answers and your insight. I think it really helped to kind of show with how research is going on, especially during this online remote time. Next slide, please.
And now we're changing gears just a little bit. We're going to be talking about career advice for students who are looking ahead, or maybe some fourth years who are kind of worried, stressed with everything going on. We're talking about people maybe going to the private sector or getting ready to go to graduate school. So the first question is, what advice do you have students looking for letters of recommendation? I definitely know that this is something that a lot of people get really stressed out when they think about this. So what are your recommendations for this?
How do I get in here?
I think you're in here.
How do I don't see myself, not that I'm narcissistic, but I see myself every time I do a Zoom class. So what do I start my video? This is,
I think
there I am. Good. No, great.
we can see
You
it.
know, I just saw myself in a guest lecture. You know, good. I'll defer to everybody, but I'd like to contribute as well. I write maybe 150 letters of recommendation a year. I get this all the time. I'm an old veteran of doing this, and I know what I'm doing. I tell my students, look, you have to be relatively assertive. You have to ask your professors. I tend to be extraordinarily responsive to my students when they ask, and I tell them, look, this is it's a big university, and it's exacerbated because we're in a Zoom world at the moment. But you have to be nice. You have to to be very gracious, but you have to be persistent because you need those letters of recommendation. They're tremendously important when you're applying to graduate and professional school. And I've run the gamut: law school, medical school, dental school. I haven't hit podiatry yet, but I've hit pretty much everything else. And I tend to be very responsive, but some faculty are so overwhelmed with other things that you do need we talked about that before, the kind of gentle reminder. And you need to give faculty reasonable amount of time to do that. You can't ask them the night before, oh, and by the way, this is due tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, because it just isn't going to work that way. So it's really important to give them a couple of weeks to do it. And it's really important in a class to try to make some initial contact with the faculty. Now, obviously, you have a range of faculty members. Some are friendlier than others. So it's really important when you're doing that to try to locate those faculty members who seem more responsive. Because they're going to be the ones who are going to write on your behalf. And you've got to find faculty members who are going to write more than just boilerplate letters, because people on admission committees are going to look for something that has some personal dimension in it. Nothing more than he or she was there and got an A. Everybody got A's. So there has to be some dimension of why this applicant deserves consideration for this graduate program or that professional school. So the onus really is on students, but I think as faculty members, we can take a couple of moments here and there to offer that advice actually in a class and urge the students. We can certainly do that when they visit us in the office. I don't want to monopolize any more time, but I've been through this for 50 years.
No, yeah, I think that was great information, even for me, because I'm a fourth year and I'm looking at, asking professors for letters of recommendation. All of that was, I think, spot on. Does anyone else want to add on to that?
I guess I could add, there's really two classes of letters that I write. One would be students that work in my lab, and then I can really draw a lot on what they specifically do. So students who are doing research with me, those letters I think are a little easier to write, and there's plenty of time to ask for one. I also write for students who are in my classes. Those, I think it's a little bit more difficult to write those letters given, the student, I might not know them as well. I can still write them a positive letter and how they excelled in the class and that there was a challenging class and et cetera. But I think that those, I think you would like not just those kind of letters. I think you would also like letters from someone who you worked with more closely. So at least, one letter from a research mentor or someone that you did a really specific project with that can tell you about what's really unique about that student other than they did well in your challenging course. So so I think maybe thinking ahead for, like, if you're a second or third year student, of ways you can get more involved with faculty so they can give you that kind of a personal letter, I think would be important for your application going forward. And then I would also say that what I find really helpful, not just giving me enough time, and gentle reminders are very well appreciated. But I think I've had faculty, or when I've been trying to write letters, I think faculty appreciate a list of deadlines, making it very easy rather than just kind of some random emails. Like if there's several places you're applying to, what those deadlines are. And I think also, especially if, say, you take a year off or so, and then you request a letter, trying to kind of refresh the faculty member's memory, saying, oh, I worked in your lab 2 years ago, and we did this project. And just because some faculty work with lots of students, and maybe by sending your CV in or resume, or saying, well, since I left your lab, I was a research associate over in this lab, and I really like that because of these reasons. Or maybe also including a DPR just so they can see the kind of challenging courses. So I really appreciate it when the student gives me any information I can put in the letter to make a strong letter, like what they've been doing in addition to the work they did in my lab, the courses that they've taken, and why they are motivated for this particular program. So making it easy for the faculty that are writing for you, I think, is a good idea.
Tremendously important. I tell my students, help me help you.
Yeah, definitely so important to make sure that your professor has all the information they need to write you a really strong letter of rec. So the next question is, what would you say to students who want to go on to graduate school, and what can they do to prepare now?
Well, yeah, I get this I get these inquiries all the time, and it's problematic in some fields. It's especially problematic in some humanities and social science fields. And one, I think, has to be very candid about that. The job market is tough. And if they're going to go on in certain humanities and social science fields, they have to be supremely motivated to do that. Because the chances of, unless they're prepared to look for alternative careers outside of academia, and that is a blunt reality. And I think that faculty mentors have to be especially candid in saying, look, this is a long and arduous path. And it's going to take you 6, 7, 8 years. You really need to do it in that time. You shouldn't have to transition from graduate school to Social Security. You should do it relatively rapidly. But you should know that it's going to take a long time, and you need to know exactly what the prospects are. If you're going to do it in things like art history and philosophy and some of the other fields, you need to understand exactly what that entails and where you're going to go. And the blunt reality, too, is that if you don't go to certain kinds of schools, your prospects are really quite marginal. And I do think that it's the responsibility of people at the undergraduate level to be as absolutely candid as they can be about that. And a lot of people aren't. So I am.
Thank you so much. I wanted to ask Professor Rensel if you had any input on this question.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess my big piece of, I would echo what Dr. Von Blum said in terms of thinking about, the field that you're interested in, and doing a little bit more research about kind of job prospects and potential careers that you can have with your graduate degree. In STEM, that doesn't mean that you will stay in academia. There's a lot of other options, industry and kind of other kinds of ways to use a graduate degree for sure. So that's something to consider. I would also say, in terms of, thinking about grad schools, it's really important to shop around and to be in touch with programs that you're interested in, to kind of figure out about exactly how they go about their process, because some schools will bring in a whole cohort of students without having a kind of a mentor for them yet, whereas others you kind of go to work with the mentor, which was my personal experience. So the university didn't want to hear from me until they knew I was going to work with this one person. So shopping around, and if possible, talk to students who are in those programs, because they're going to be able to give you the actual inside view about, about what's actually happening in the program, telling you what's working. There's probably always going to be issues with any grad program, but you can kind of get a sense of the sort of dynamics there and the community of your peers that you would be joining as part of that process as well. So really, yeah, doing your research, getting to know the people as part of the program is something I highly recommend, because it's a commitment, right? Depending on, PhD programs can go for a very long time, many, many years, depending on your program. Master's programs would probably be a little bit shorter, which is something to keep in mind. But, doing your homework before kind of committing to what's a big deal moving into a grad program.
Yeah, definitely so important to do research before you commit to something for that long. I also wanted to say Professor Abramson and Professor Mazey just joined our Zoom call. So would you guys want to chime in? We're talking about what you would say to students who want to go on to grad school, like what can they do right now to prepare? What would be your advice?
What level are they? Are we talking about freshman, sophomore?
We have like quite a range here right now, so anyone really.
Anyone. I mean, the rigorous grad schools first have a kind of a cutoff score. They're just going to look at your grades and your GREs. So my best advice is to do well in your undergraduate classes, because if you have the GPA and you do decent on the GREs, then it becomes discretionary, and it's somewhat discipline specific. Like if you're going to go into law school, how you do on LSAT in combination with your grades really determines the schools you go to. And law school ranks everything. They rank the departments, they rank the schools, they rank the professors, they rank everything, and they rank the students. So, that kind of determines what you want to do. And then there's the content stuff, what area of law you want to specialize in. And some schools are better than others, or other simple things that come in is locale. Likely where you go to law school or grad school, you may reside within that area. So you want to go to a place that you'd be comfortable living in. For psychology, it tends not to be that. Unless you're in clinical psychology, then you're going to set up a private practice. But if you're going to go on the academic market, again, you're going to go national. So I grew up in Connecticut, and I got a degree at University of Connecticut, PhD there, and then I ended up at UCLA. So I went all the way across the country, but I just literally sent out all these applications. And same with graduate school. For myself, my own experience was, I was a so-so undergraduate. My first 2 years that, I kind of partied and did what undergraduates sometimes do. In the last 2 years, I did very, very well. And it kind of opted me out of a good PhD program. So I went to a good master's program. And from there, did very well and published a bunch, even as a master's student. And then PhD programs started asking me to come. And there was someone at University of Connecticut who was doing the work just like I was, and ended up working with him. I got my own funding. I just wrote a grant through National Institute of Mental Health. I guess I got a teaching assistantship as well from the university. And then, the choice for, if you're going to go on the traditional academic route, professors are evaluated in terms of their publication record. So I published a lot as a graduate student, and I didn't do a postdoc. I just went from the PhD to professor. So the many different routes, I think that, I guess my bottom line advice is do really well at what you're interested in and think outside the box, and don't simply do the course and the coursework. You know, expand your scope on the kinds of things you're interested in. And you don't really have to have a plan. I mean, I really had no plan when I went to grad school. I mean, many people in psychology think, well, I'm going to be a clinical psychologist, and I didn't think that was it. I was just interested in particular research questions without anything in mind. And then I happened to publish a lot, and I figured, oh, I guess I could be a professor. And then, you know, went in the job market, and that was confirmed. So, I mean, so much of this is serendipity. And, you know, over the course of my career at UCLA, I've done a lot of expert witness work. But when I first came to UCLA, I had really long hair, and I didn't look like you'd expect someone to be in a courtroom. But I happened to write a book that was about issues that are specific, while still, I guess I was writing it while I was an assistant professor, that were specific to litigation. And I was immediately drawn into litigation. So a lot of my career is really serendipitous. But what I did well. So that's my soundbite. Longer than a soundbite, but sort of my soundbite version.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Also, Dr. Macy, would you like to chime in and tell us any of your advice for students who are looking into going to graduate?
So here.
Yes, I think we can hear you.
Is she muted? Because I can't hear.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay.
Maybe turn up his computer volume.
Well, I'm on the phone.
Oh.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah. Okay, good. So what are we talking about? Letters of recommendation?
Yeah, right now we're actually talking about what is your advice for students who are looking to go into graduate school?
Well, of course, do your research and be diligent in trying to find a school that matches your interests. And sometimes it's not always obvious what school matches your interests if you have broad-ranging interests and you want, let's say I was interested in psychology, but I was also interested in philosophy. And my first advanced degree was in philosophy, and I had always planned long-term to go into psychology. So my next degree was a PhD in psychology. So I think it's really important when you think about grad school, if you know what you want, if you're going to medical school or law school, then it's easy. But if you're still searching, I think that you need to select very carefully areas that you can build on. Like it was easy for me as a person destined to get into mental health to spend a couple of years studying philosophy and asking difficult questions, because what you end up doing in psychology is also responding to different questions that come up, and you're able to critically evaluate those questions, you know, like what is normal, what is mental health, and if you have too much anxiety, do you have a disorder, or do you have a series of existential dilemmas that, if properly attended to, can be alleviated without psychiatric intervention. But so I guess my advice for students thinking about grad school is to, you know, talk to your family and friends, and obviously do your research. I mean, most people do that, but you have to think about what makes you unique as an individual, because you'll be competing against very intelligent, highly qualified people. But I think graduate schools are looking for a good match. They want someone who understands why they're selecting that campus. So I always advise students to carefully research the faculty and know what you're getting into. And if you want flexibility, you have to think about what graduate school will allow you to have some flexibility if that's a requirement. Now, I had a liberal arts education, so I was always interested in any discipline that contributed to an understanding of my fellow human beings. So like today, for instance, when I teach my honors collegium seminar, I draw on multiple resources: philosophy, psychology, neuroscience. And we're trying to answer a simple question, but it's an elusive question. What is fear? And when you have found good foundations in your educational experience, you're able to tackle those questions and to stick with them, because the big dilemma sometimes when you're doing advanced study is realizing that you have so many differences of opinion. You have to carve out a place for yourself, and you have to learn to take hold of your own voice and your own critical thinking skills, because you're going to have to decide what makes sense for you and how you can best fulfill your educational aspirations.
Thank
But
you.
I don't know. Yeah.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much for all of your guys' insight. It was just, it was very refreshing to hear from people who have gone through all of it, and hearing all of your guys' little bits of advice for us.
Good.
Yeah, so actually this is a great transition. I was going to move to our last section, which is any general advice that you guys have. And I know that I think Professor Mattinson had something that she wanted to contribute, so we can start there.
Sure. Hi, I'm sort of addressing the previous question, but it's relevant for this too. I would like to say, be bold and ask for what you want. I'll give you some examples. First, in terms of grad school, find books and things that interest you and read them. Anything that was not assigned by an instructor, right? But search for things and be an autodidact, be self-taught. This way you can really demonstrate evidence for your interest in the field, and you can participate in professional conversations. You can also attend some conferences and seminars even as an undergrad. And again, enter the field before you're officially accepted into it from grad school. You know, become that young professional scholar earlier, right? And that way you'll be more likely to hopefully meet the right kind of people that will help you. I want to tell you something. I saw a movie on Netflix the other day that totally inspired me. And so I found the filmmakers online and I sent them an email, and they wrote back, and now we're in this amazing conversation. So when you find a school that you want to go to, reach out to the faculty who are there and the people who are working in fields that interest you, and be bold and contact them and say, hey, I'm an undergraduate at UCLA, or I'm a senior at UCLA, or even earlier than that. And I would really love to chat with you about your work. And maybe you've read one of their books already, and maybe you share interests in similar research questions. You know, invite them. Can we have a phone call or a Zoom call? Or are you open to conversation? You won't always get what you want, but be bold and ask, because you never know. Some people will respond, and you start to build these relationships. And I'll just offer one quick note, just something to think about. I feel like in our educational culture, we're taught to think about my grade and my major and my career and my life and my money and my world, my family, right? But we need each other. And so one of the best things you can do is to practice the art of conversation and engage other people, right? Have you ever been in a class where you get, it's like a discussion section, and you get a question from the teacher and everybody sits there and answers the question, and then they're like, well, we're done, okay, and then they just sit there. You're never done, right? You want to extend and elevate and expand the conversation. I used to go to, first of all, when I was in grad school, they would have department parties, and I would stand in the corner with a glass of wine and one friend that I was comfortable with, because I was so socially nervous and anxious that I was too scared to approach my professors. But you know what? We're just other people passionate about this field as well, you know? So talk to them and practice. You know, even just walking up to people as soon as COVID is over, right? Cross our fingers. Your ability to walk into a space and introduce yourself, shake people's hands, inspire conversation, ask really great questions, show insights, and share your struggles as well. You do not have to come up with some sort of polished performance, but share your struggles and ask people, you know, what do you love about your field? What struggles do you see in your field? What do you see as the future of your field? You know, what do you wish you had known in your field when you were my age? Any books you recommend? So ask everything you want to ask and engage with us. We're eager for it.
I'd like to second everything she said. That was wonderful advice.
Yeah, that was really wonderful. Thank you. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add? I think Professor Von Blum would like to add. No, we can't hear you. Sorry.
Can you hear me
There
now?
we go. Mhm.
There we go. All right. I always press the wrong buttons. That's a function of age. Anyway, yeah, Lori, you made really important points. This is still UCLA, and eventually we're going to have a vaccination. But I work also on the Prison Education Project, and students come to me and they ask about it when I talk about it. I've given presentations at Neidorf, at the Juvenile Institution, the Women's Institution. When I mention that, students say, this is really interesting. And sometimes I get them involved in the Prison Education Project. But other people do other things. There's a whole lot out there. You can broaden your horizons. And they say, well, look at that. And I say, here's some books you might read. Take a look at Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow. And it goes off from that to that to that to that. And that's the way they catalyze interests that they never knew that they had. That's the way they get interests. That's the way they expand their intellectual curiosity well beyond what they might have on a reading list in a particular class. That's the way they do it. And they may find an interest they never knew they had. They may decide they want to go into grad school, law school, or whatever. And there's those opportunities to do it right here at UCLA, even under the constrained arrangements that we presently have, that will, I hope, come to an end, perhaps even after January 20th.
Yeah, thank you. I know that's very great advice. And, you know, everyone's kind of hoping for the end of the pandemic, but you're right. There's opportunities to get involved, you know, take that step, be bold, like Professor Mattinson was saying. Does anyone have any other advice that they'd like to add to this section?
I'd like to add one thing to Lori's suggestions to everyone. Take risks. We're not looking for cookie cutter types. We're actually looking for people to stand out in a crowd. And again, you know, the best advice I give is to educate yourself as best as possible, but don't be afraid to take risks. You want to be different, particularly for employment, not only for admission to graduate school, but be willing to take risks, personal risks, academic risks, and so on, that are true to you.
Yeah, I love that. Professor S, I know that you teach, you know, HC50 with the roadmap course as well. Do you have anything you'd like to add to kind of that idea?
Yeah, I echo all of these things, and as you know, I talk a lot about this in that particular course because those are the things that freshmen, sophomore, and juniors are that they're not ready yet to do, or they don't know how, and it is just taking risks. And you never know the connections you're going to meet. As I said in my own story, like I'm a I'm a film historian, and yet I teach writing, and my path was not exactly what I thought it was going to be initially when I first got here, or when I started my PhD, and it ended up taking me into really marvelous new places. And that's because I took risks and I got over the, as Lori mentioned, being in the corner and not talking, which I know seems, I have had quite a few of you. I'm not very shy at all, but I was at one point, and it was really getting over that and then connecting with people's whose research I was really interested in. That is extremely important, that you try and make these connections. You have this opportunity as undergrads once in your life to really try to explore and figure out what you want to do next. And I think it's just you don't want to squander this opportunity either. You really want to take advantage of everything UCLA has to offer, and there's so much, and getting involved is so important. And I mean, I try to do it even with students. I know even Emery here, I've connected her with other students because Emery's designed her own major, and your professors could, we have lots of suggestions to offer you, even if we don't know the path you're necessarily going to take. So I really do, I echo everything that has been said, and I especially echo the taking risks, because you never know. You might think you are gonna go be a biologist, but maybe not. Maybe you meet somebody and you end up taking a class that just changes your entire path and your entire perspective, and shifts your perspective into something that you never could have even imagined. So that's important to me, and that's some of the things, like discovering yourself that's part of is part of your experience here at UCLA. But I also want to echo for graduate school, do your research. And I also echo the sentiments of knowing that it's an investment. It's gonna time and money, and do the research for those schools and the programs, and reach out to professors and students. Again, I know that advice was given, but that definitely helped me when I was making my decisions for grad school, spending time with the students and some of the faculty who were at UCLA when I first came here to get my master's and PhD. It's what helped me make my final decision, actually. So again, I echo all of this. It's all excellent advice.
Thank you, Professor S. I appreciate that. Professor Knowlton or Rensel or Shipe, do you guys have anything you'd like to add? I mean, we're just going to move into Q&A after this, so any last thoughts are wonderful.
I wonder if I could just add quickly, I wanted to echo this idea of going to conferences as being extremely important, particularly in STEM fields, but I think probably even more broadly. So you have a lot of opportunities at UCLA for conferences just here on campus that involve undergraduate, particularly undergraduate research. But you may also have opportunities to go to professional conferences in your field, as well as maybe conferences that would involve a number of different universities. And I think that's a really excellent way to find out what's happening in other schools, to get to the point where you can present your own research in a very comfortable way. And I think that is really very highly valued by potential mentors, to see if you are being interviewed in your application, or how you describe your work in your statement of purpose, if you've had that practice of describing it to others in a way they can understand it, that is very helpful for your application. And I know when I'm looking at grad applications, the fact that a student has presented at a conference, ranging from an undergraduate research conference at their university all the way up to a professional society, that I find that very important, because it means that they've had to think about it and explain it in a way that suggests a deeper understanding. So I would say to students, take advantage of all those opportunities as you have.
That's great, thank you. Anyone else? We're also going to move into Q&A. So if there's any questions that attendees want to put, raise hands or put them in the chat, we'll answer them that way.
I'd like to add one more thing to all the wonderful things that people have said. Don't put yourself in a box, because whatever on the front burner now may not stay that way. And if you go certainly the academic route, there's enormous freedom to pursue many interests. And it's not uncommon for UCLA professors in particular to be very interdisciplinary. Like for myself, that I've done traditional work in psychology, but then switched to epidemiological models, virology. I wrote books on constitutional law. And these were things that just changed for me, kind of spontaneously over time. So what may be, critical to you at this point in time may change. So an openness to all these possibilities, or openness to your field, is probably a good perspective as well.
I can actually maybe respond to one of the questions in the chat if we're moving to that. Asking about requesting letters of recommendation from TAs. I think that's a really good question. And I think that, at least in my experience, oftentimes, in a large class, your TA might know you much better, be much more familiar with your work than the core professor. But that's kind of a great opportunity sometimes for TAs and professors to co-write letters. And I definitely do this often for particularly students in these bigger courses. Oftentimes I'll ask students who ask for a letter of recs, I say, okay, but let's also get some input from your TA and we'll put that together. So again, building those same sorts of relationships with your TAs that you're also trying to create with the faculty members is a fabulous idea throughout.
Yeah, if we could just go to the next slide. Thank you. So for all of our students here, if you want to sign up for a newsletter, we'll be hosting more events like these in winter and spring. So be on the lookout for that. And you can also be updated by our socials. So anyways, I'm going to help us out with the Q&A. I just want to make sure that we get to every single question. So if you want to raise your hand and then you can unmute yourself and speak up, that'd be great. I'll just call on you. Or if you want to say something in the chat, I'll do that too. So let's just get this started while people start raising their hands. One of the questions that someone asked, Nathaniel asked, how can I get involved in research post-graduation? So I'm assuming you're not going to be applying for grad school. You're kind of in that in-between area.
Do you want us to answer?
Yes.
Does that start? My suggestion is you contact professors, reach out. And it's usually through, as an undergraduate, you're more likely to work with their graduate students. But if you contact professors with your initial interest, and your interest should be tied to certain things you've done, rather than a generic, well, I'm interested in this topic. I've read these books, I've read this research, I've read so forth. And you kind of tailor it to that and look for professors whose interests, which you can find by going to faculty pages, and look for their interests and approach them. Either you or your graduate students. That's the thing you want to ask. You or your graduate students looking for someone. And I have these skills. I can send my resume and so forth. So really, you have to be self-motivated to make that happen. It's not going to fall into your lap. You're really going to have to contact professors. Again, asking for them as well as their graduate students who might need it. And grad students always need help. So that's probably your easiest road into this.
Great, thank you. Another question asks, and this is more specific to psychology, but where can they find research opportunities currently with COVID? Everything is so up in the air and it's so hard to find things. So do you have any advice for people right now?
Barbara?
Yeah, I completely appreciate how difficult it is. And I know that I don't have as many students working in my lab as I normally do because I don't have as much for them to do. I think you'll have to cast a wider net than you would even in normal circumstances. I guess another thing you could probably do is continue a conversation saying that maybe we don't have something for me now, but we're anticipating research will be ramped up through the spring. So by contacting the faculty member now saying, if something opens up in summer, I will still be around, or even in the fall, are there some readings that you'd like me to get started on? That might be a way to kind of get your foot in the door, because there isn't nearly as much research going on now as there usually is. But we hope that that will change. There are a few online kinds of studies, so it's certainly possible. I do have a couple of undergraduates working in my lab now, but I'm hoping to ramp that up in spring or summer. So I bet a lot of other faculty are in that situation. So maybe seeing if you can at least set up something for the future.
And some of the projects in psychology that are online are utilizing data that's easily accessible, like social media and things like that, to show, gender differences, or show political interests, or show these sorts of things that you can track across these domains.
Makes sense. Okay, great. Thank you. Our next question comes from Nina. She asks, could you tell us what not to do in the course if we want a letter of rec for med school? In other words, what are some good behaviors of students that you want to recommend? And what are some bad behaviors of students that you would say, oh, I don't want to recommend this student? I guess this is I've always wondered this too, so I'm sorry, this is a little self-indulgent, but have you ever written a bad letter of recommendation? If someone has come up and asked for one, does that ever happen?
It's not happened with me, because I'll be upfront. I'll just say, I don't think I could write a good letter.
I say that too. I won't torpedo a student. I'll just say, yeah, I can't write one on your behalf. Either said, look, you have to find somebody else. Either the quality of your work was insufficient, or you're just not the kind of person I believe I can recommend for medical school. You need to find somebody else. There's no particular kind of behavior. I really enjoy writing recommendations for medical school when people come and visit me often enough, and I get a sense of their personality. The kinds of people I would intuitively think would be good doctors, the kinds of people I would like to see as my physician. I mean, I know it's enormously subjective, but the kind of people I would feel comfortable with seeing myself or my family or my friends in a doctor's office. It is tremendously subjective, but the more you come and visit your professors, even virtually now, I think the higher the probability is that you can get a really good letter of recommendation. And that counts. That counts. Now, I speak from the humanities. I mean, I teach basically the humanities. That's important for people going into medical school, because they all do really well on the MCAT. They all have lots of science courses. If you can get a strong letter from somebody outside the field of the sciences, that adds a hugely important dimension, showing that they are multidimensional. And that they have something other than strong scientific knowledge. It shows that they have something that will add to the humanistic dimension as they apply to medical school. I do that a lot.
Yeah, so that's perfect. You're only going to write a good recommendation letter, which, so if a professor agrees, that should kind of ease your fears over, having a bad or good letter.
I can't imagine anybody just doing something that torpedoes somebody's application. That's just unimaginable to me.
That would be pretty awful. Okay.
And also, I want to add to this. Honor students are good students. I mean, part of the issue is that the students we get in our classes are very strong. In the classes that we teach, we get mostly STEM students, even though it seems like it's a psychology. We get astrophysics and microbiology and applied mathematics and all these sort of things. Many of whom are tracking for med school. And, the question for me is, the quality work is usually good. And those are people who approach you. So it's a question for me is basically knowing more about them other than a grade in a class, so that you can write something for the class.
Sure, sure.
I'm gonna jump in there. I know we're running out of time here, but I saw a question in the chat about, do you recommend students to ask for letters of rec extremely early, like a freshman or a sophomore who just finished their class? So the impression is fresh. The main thing I'd say is ask your instructor. Hey, I just took your class. I loved it. I feel like we have a great rapport. I was thinking about asking you for a letter of recommendation. Would you like me to wait, or is that something you'd consider now? And so I would say just ask the person and be upfront about what you want. Again, be bold. And a couple of quick notes about letters of rec. I would say for me, because I teach some freshmen and some seniors, I really don't love it when a student will say, hey, I took your class 4 years ago. Can you write me a letter of rec? Stay in touch with professors who inspire you or whose work you're interested in, and continue your relationship with them. I have lots of relationships that also, even with students who didn't take my class, but just connected with me over writing or something. So stay in touch with people as opposed to reaching back from the past, and find people who know you and your work well, which means you have to take initiative during the quarter to take a leadership role or post great questions in the discussion forum, make yourself known, and think about what you can contribute to the class. And the other thing I would say is, because I teach writing, I know that there's this formula going around about how to ask for a letter of rec over email, like, dear professor, fill in the blank. I took your class XYZ and I loved it for the 3 following reasons. Okay, I hate the formula because I teach writing. And so it's all about, who are you, your voice, express yourself. So I would say, if you can, don't just plug in pieces into a formula. Write a very sincere, honest, and open letter of recommendation. I mean, why is it that you're looking to me to recommend you for medical school or law school or a PhD program or a scholarship or anything else, right? Just be open and speak to me about it. So to me, that's another big point.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you. No, this has all been so helpful for me too. I noticed there was a question in the chat about a transfer student. So I know that there is some of those people here. So if you want, we're gonna actually cut this short a little bit because so many people are leaving. What we'll do is we'll try to get to your questions in the newsletter that the Honors Fellows sent out. Maybe we can ask you guys, just email our panelists. Thank you for coming again. Just the questions that